Good evening, everyone. Welcome. I hear that we still have music playing in the background. But thank you so much for joining this evening, joining our third series of On Being Human Conversations. My name is Vatetsi, and I will be your host today. I'm a clinical psychologist who is very much invested in hosting conversations around mental health, and going beyond the couch, which is where I ordinarily would be. So I'm really looking forward to tonight's conversation. And I hope that you are too. And we're joined by a very special lady who's going to be sharing some insights on parenthood and managing that with the workplace. So thank you so much for joining our conversation today. Once again, this is On Being Human Conversations. I host these once a month on different topics around psychological wellness and just well-being. So please feel free to pop in any topics that you would like to see me discuss over the next coming months. We had one in Jan, and then we had our second one in February, and then our fourth one will be in May. So we will be taking a break in April, but we will be back in May with more conversations. So I really look forward to today. Please feel free to pop in questions during the conversation. If you have any questions for me or my guest, Hilda, please do so that we can, just hear your thoughts and where you're at. So Hilda is Hilda Kabushenga. She is the CEO of the African Talent Company, which focuses on talent management, and it's Nigeria's biggest jobs platform with over 2 million countries, including Jobberman Nigeria, and it hosts over 60,000 employers and various people who are seeking employment. And she's very much invested in human capital, organizational behavior, as well as motherhood. So how I connected with her was actually because of her passion around motherhood. And I'm looking forward to what she's going to share today. So the conversation is on navigating parenthood as a working mom or as a working parent, as a working father. So I hope we have both moms and fathers this evening that are represented. And I hope that you will enjoy the conversation and the insights that she has for us this evening. So let me welcome our guest, Hilda Kabushenga.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
Hi, Hilda. Hi. Thank you so much for joining. How are you?
Thank you for having me. I'm well. How are you doing?
I am great. Thank you.
I have a little bit of a cough, so I hope you don't mind. I'll be clearing my throat sometimes.
Oh, that's all right. That's all right. We're just glad that you can make it. And I hope that the viewers out there are also looking forward to our conversation this evening. So I shared a little bit about who you are, but I think I didn't do you justice. So maybe let's start by you telling us a little bit about yourself, who you are, and how you spend your hours in a day.
Sure. You actually did me justice. So I am Hilda. I am Ugandan born. And raised mostly, went to school in South Africa for a bit, have worked mostly in West Africa, first in consulting, in East Africa for KPMG, in West Africa for McKinsey, and then left consulting after I had my first child to join, Ringier, which is the parent company for the African Talent Company, and kind of like rose through those ranks from job and CEO in Nigeria to my current portfolio, which is the head of all the African businesses. When I'm not doing that, I've got 2 children. So I've got a 4-year-old son and a 2-year-old daughter that I take care of. I think one of the things that I'm grateful for is I mostly get to work remotely and I can be with my kids. That's a big part of my life. I also do a lot of like, speaking about, being a working mom on Instagram. So it's something else I do with my day. And yeah, that's pretty much me
All
in a very
right.
quick nutshell.
Okay. Thanks, Hilda.
Yeah.
So maybe let's dive into the conversation and just tell me about your experience of motherhood or parenting so far.
Whew, they say it's a roller coaster, but you kind of you don't believe it's a roller coaster. But the truth is, parenting is a roller coaster. And the reason for that is because before you have a child, you kind of feel like your life is complete. Like your life is already full. It's hard to take care of yourself as a young adult. You have a job that you work in a 9 to 5. You have family and friends and everything you're nurturing. And then, you find out you're having a child and you've got these 9 months to prepare, but even then it's not enough because it's not like you're at your best in those 9 months. But then when your child comes, you have to, make space for a whole new life that you're
Mhm.
responsible for, end to end. It's not like you can outsource some things, but really when your baby's young, they expect this much from you. And I think for me, the biggest shock was just like, okay, yes, the love is there when you give birth. I think for most of us are fortunate enough that the love is there from the start, but that doesn't mean capacity is there. um, how do I move from having a good sleeping schedule to not sleeping for a full night for almost a whole year? How do I move from taking care of just myself and maybe my partner to taking care of a child? There's a lot around like even just the what does it take care of a baby, like feeding a baby? Can I breastfeed? Can I not breastfeed? I think was the biggest shocker, like trying to figure out how to create extra capacity for this new life um, that is depending on me for almost everything. And then also, how do you adjust the rest of your life to make room for it? Now you're a mom, or now you have your dad. You still have to show up at work. You still have to show up in your other relationships. You still have to make time for yourself. And I think it takes a while to find that balance. I think for me, on average, it takes like anywhere between 9 months and 2 years to kind of get back to where I was pre-baby. Um, and you have to like kind of rebuild your life step by step to say, okay, now there's a child. For the first few weeks, probably all I can focus on is a child. After all, I have to go back to work. I think in most of our markets, it's like 3 months, which is nothing. But then now I have to go back to work and have the child, and then eventually get to a place like, okay, fine, I've gotten a handle on work. If you do, some people quit, and the next step becomes, okay, how can I find myself again? Do I have capacity for Hilda? Can I go to the gym? Can I go out to lunch? Can I go out to dinner? Like, am I sleeping well? Like the self-care aspect comes in maybe like, almost a year after you've had the child. Um, and all this time just navigating and watching your capacity expand and figuring out ways to also expand it. So that's been like that's been my experience. But at the end of the day, it's all joy. I think having children is a lovely thing. They bring lots of happiness, lots of stress, but also lots of happiness.
Mm. And remind me again, you mentioned that your children they are 4 and
4 and almost 2. So she'll be 2
oh,
in June. So yeah.
okay, okay, 2 and 4. Those are critical ages, hey?
Yeah. For
Mm,
different reasons, but yeah.
mm. And Hilda, you spoke about how when you became a mom, one of the things that you kind of had to grapple with was how to create space to be a mom.
Yeah.
And can you tell me a bit more about that? What do you mean by having to create space?
So first of all, mentally you have to create space because taking care of somebody is not a joke. It's not something you can take lightly because from the moment this baby wakes up and throughout their day, they're looking at you and maybe your partner and whatever support system you build up, but to meet 100% of their needs, right? I think until that point, unless you've been in a situation where you've had to take care of siblings for a long, prolonged period of time or something, but until that point, at least in my life, I'd never been in a situation where on top of just taking care of myself and maybe my partner, but he's still an adult, so it's not like I'm taking care of him. um I
Mm,
have to I have to create mentally the mindset to say, okay, fine, this is also my responsibility. It's not something you can drop. And I know, if you know about, like, lots of young moms actually can't do this, and they end up either having to put the babies in care or up for adoption or something, because you have to actually say, okay, fine, I can actually do this. I can take care of this child. I can change all the diapers, I can feed. Maybe if I can't breastfeed, I can bottle feed. I will wake up at night, like, I will stay sane through it all, and it's quite nerve-wracking. You think about somebody, going for 3 months on minimal amount of sleep. Um, and it's just some mental resilience you have to build in to say, I can actually do this. This is my child. I love my child. I can do this. That's like the mental part of it. And I think probably it's probably the biggest part. Once your headspace is in the right space, and I'm committed to taking care of this child. Then you can create the physical space, which is more okay. I'm not sleeping at night. What are we going to do about that? Can I afford a nanny? If I can't afford a nanny, how am I going to nap during the day? Do I need to figure out? Do I need to get a new job to that's can accommodate my current situation? Do I need to quit my current job for a while and first figure out how I'm going to manage with this child? There's the physical aspects of it. Does this baby need a schedule? At some point, they need to get into a schedule. What does that schedule look like? How does that interact with, be it my own schedule or your partner's schedule or everybody else in your life? Are we going to get a creche? Can we afford a creche? That's like the financial space for it, right? Can we afford a creche? What kind of help can we afford? And I think all of that is just like one big, it's all happening in real time and happening really fast. And even though they say you've had 9 months to prepare, didn't you know you had a child? It's really not the same thing. When the baby's here, they're there. If you run out of diapers in the middle of the night, you have to go and get diapers. There's no okay, no, we'll wing it till morning. No. So it's just that's kind of what I mean by creating the space, both in your
Mm,
mind, but also like in your physical life. Everything you're doing before changes because you now have somebody else to accommodate.
mm.
Yeah.
But I imagine that this process would have started during pregnancy. Did
Yes and no. I think psychologically it does start during pregnancy and even just like thinking about plans, what are we going to do? But it doesn't get real till the baby's here for many reasons. First of all, you don't know what kind of birth you're going to have. I have like a cousin, for example, who is one of my biggest role models who always drives herself back home from the hospital. Like she just gives birth, she's fine, she talks to the doctor, whatever. She puts the baby in the back seat with the car seat and drives home. And she gets home and life is good. She can, pick things up, whatever, 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 and it's good to go. But then there's some people, for example, go in expecting natural birth and have a C-section. Or you go in expecting a healthy baby and your baby has complications, or you have complications. Or even then you think you're gonna be like, I thought I was gonna be one of these like hardcore people, natural birth, whatever. Instead, I'm like, 24-hour labor, epidural, something else. And that even psychologically, like for me, getting over the fact that with my first child, that I had a 24-hour labor, I needed an epidural. I spent maybe like the first month after I had him thinking, was I weak? Was I weak? Because I'm surrounded by all these women who say, I didn't use an epidural, I can manage the pain of labor, blah, blah, blah. And so already you're starting from like a step back. So all the dreams and hopes I'd had of being the strong woman who just like bounces in already got challenged in the process of giving birth, right? So even though you've had these processes and thoughts, throughout pregnancy, it's not real till the baby arrives, and you don't know the situation you'll be in when the baby arrives. I would say there's something you can do, like getting yourself mentally prepared. Do I want this child? But even then, some people really want the child and they give birth, and then you have postpartum depression, you have the baby blues that are really, really bad. And then you're like, I don't want to see my baby at all. These are not things you can plan for before the child arrives. You can plan things like, oh, we're going to get a nanny, let's save up some money, but it's also not the same until the child arrives when you're dealing with, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, I suppose that for me makes a lot of sense. So when you speak about, as a mom, I imagine that you have an idea of how you want your motherhood journey to actually play out. You have
You
these
do.
visions and
I want to say you do have an idea, but the thing is, you're the kind of mother you are will change depending on your child, right? Because
mm,
if you have a high needs child or high dependency child, you cannot be the kind of mother who wants to be laid back and do child-led weaning, like because your baby maybe is very sensitive to certain foods and like, okay, I can't do child-led weaning. We have like a menu of 3 things we can work with. Or you want to be the kind of mom that breastfeeds exclusively and then you have mastitis. And then you have to go through like the psychological thing of, okay, yes, I cannot breastfeed. My boobs have let me down. I need to be okay with giving my baby formula. What does that take? That's a very, very, very like challenging thing mentally for most mothers, by the way. Like the idea that I can't feed my child. And then the way society also pushes down on it. You should be breastfeeding exclusively. Why are you breastfeeding exclusively? Have you tried X? Have you tried Y? And like, I'm tired of all the remedies, guys. I've tried this thing. So even though you've got this idea of motherhood, the kind of child you have will challenge you, even from child to child. I remember with my first son, for example, he was a very calm baby. Even when I was going back to work, I was not concerned. He was not really a crier. He was very adaptable. He was, could leave him with somebody and he'll be fine, like my mom or like an aunt or a nanny, and he'd be fine. With my daughter, it was complete opposite. From the very beginning, she didn't want anybody to touch her, anybody to carry her except me. She would cry for literally 3 hours nonstop, like can't be exhausted. She wanted to be held a lot more. So that what I thought I'd do, for example, like my maternity leave, just being like my son, do some more stuff, maybe start gymming early, all those things I couldn't do because she wanted me to hold her all the time. And so I found that I'm parenting my daughter different than I parented my son because as children, they have completely different personalities and they expect different things from me.
Mm,
or a different level of intervention, if that makes sense. So yeah, your
mm,
best laid plans, you can, the big picture might remain the same, but every child teaches you something different, and you'll be different with each of your children. You'll show up the way they need you to show them up
mm,
for, not as a standard. Yeah.
mm, mm. So I mean, tell me about your first experience of being a mother. I mean,
Yeah.
when you reflect on it, what sort of comes to mind now in retrospect around the kind of mom you were?
With my first child, I think I was highly anxious. With my first child, also I had the baby blues. So I was highly anxious. I was not happy, at least for the first month or so. And there's a lot to figure out. Um, I just remember thinking, I have a happy, healthy baby. I was with my sisters, so they were being really helpful. But for some reason, I just didn't find that like eternal joy of motherhood, like this well everybody says they drink from. We're like, oh my God, I'm so blessed. My baby's happy, and I knew my baby's happy. My baby's healthy. I've got good support, but still, I just couldn't shake the blues. Later on, I just realized, sometimes like that is the hormones. You've had all these hormones in your body. They've now being flushed out. You're not getting enough sleep. That's the one thing. My partner wasn't around, so even though like I had lots of help during the day, at night it was mostly me, only, and the baby. And you're waking up multiple times a day. I mean, multiple times a night. So you're pretty much like working on 3 hours or so of sleep. So I remember my first sense being, yes, I was grateful, but also very, very stressed. And I kept thinking, yes, it's a blessing. Like, I understand that this is a blessing, but one, the process of getting this blessing is not easy. Let's not kid ourselves. Pregnancy is not a joke. And that was weighing heavily on my mind because I had a tough pregnancy. And then also now that the baby's here, it's also not a joke. Like, I get it, you're a blessing, but at the same time, like, I just wish it could just be me and my happiness, or me and my things. So that process of creating capacity for second baby was really hard for me, my first child. So I was highly anxious. I was a lot more concerned about, like, what is eating, was not eating, have I cleaned these bottles, have I done this. With my second child, a lot more chilled, because you're like, I've done this before. I know what's good and what's bad. I know the range of what's normal. But then you don't really have a benchmark. With your first child, you don't have a benchmark. And
Mm,
so every small cold, every small fever, every small thing, you run to the doctor. So a lot of things, even stressing yourself out because you don't have a benchmark, and you don't want to be the person who didn't act and then ended up with like with a child in hospital because you ignored that fever. Or you don't want to be the person that gives your child formula that they react to, or you don't want to even just, you have to whisper like, I'm not breastfeeding, because you don't want to be the person, the mom that's, oh my goodness, not breastfeeding. So
mm,
it creates lots of anxiety. And then I think with me also, I just knew I had to go back to work, to a very intense, high stress job. And even though I was on maternity leave, there's also this like countdown to, oh my God, will I be ready to go back? Do I even still have my brain? Am I still thinking? Can I do this? What happens to my child then? So I was really preoccupied with all these thoughts with my first child. I was very anxious, happy, but highly anxious, I'd say.
mm, mm.
Yeah.
And you speak about you say that you had a tough pregnancy, and then also you experienced the baby blues
Yeah.
postpartum. Can you tell me about those two experiences?
Whew, so pregnancy was a mess. My first child, I had hyperemesis. With both my kids, but different situations with both of them. But first son, I had hyperemesis, and then I also had like a really, really bad case of reflux. So I ended up pretty much throwing up every day, almost till I was like 8.5 months pregnant. Um, and it just takes a physical toll. Like, vomiting is not a good experience. And
Mm,
also, even though there's maternity leave, but there's really not much allowance for like pregnancy ailments before you give birth. So you're doing all this stuff while going through your job and being expected to show up to your job like as an okay person. I mean, you're pregnant, you're not disabled. That's what they always say. But with every woman, it's different. And some people do have. Every time I hear about a woman who's like, "Oh yeah, I'm pregnant. I don't have morning sickness," I'm like, "Wait, what?" Like, good for you. I don't think you understand what a blessing it is that you don't have morning sickness, because for some of us it's all day sickness every month. It doesn't
mm,
last only 3 months, it lasts more like 6 or 7 or 8, some even 9. Some people really do get hospitalized. There's a lot of weight loss. So that was for me the journey. I was sick most of the pregnancy, and I just by the time the baby came, I was over it. And then of course he came 2 weeks late, so I was like really, really over it. And then finally I had to be induced, and it took him about 24 hours to get out. So that entire process, by the time the baby came, I was just tired. I was
wow.
tired, and I was pissed off, and I was tired of being sick. Um, And then I couldn't rest because you'd expect, okay, fine, baby's here, let me rest. But no, you can't rest because now you need to meet the baby's needs. And I think that's how kind of like I just end up in the whole baby blues space where I'm coming from like a very high stress pregnancy. All I want is a break, but there's no break coming, and no break really comes. You can
Mm,
have your friends and family and structure step in, but no break really comes, at least not for the first year, in my experience.
mm, mm. So would I be correct in saying that that experience of your pregnancy would have been perinatal depression?
I would not. So at first I thought
Mhm.
maybe, but I'll not describe it that way because with my second pregnancy, I do believe I had perinatal depression. I spoke to somebody about it. In
Okay.
my first pregnancy was rough and it was stressful. My second pregnancy, I was depressed. I was sad. And this was because on top of hyperemesis, I got a really bad case of COVID in my first trimester. And I was like, down for about 5 weeks. And so every time, like, I had this emotion of like, is this long COVID or is this pregnancy? Because long COVID also does cause depression and like
Mm,
this mental fogginess and everything. And pregnancy does it as well. So I feel like I got a double dose. But in my second pregnancy, I honestly felt like I could not see the light of day. I was in a dark tunnel and I was just like trying to just take step by step to make it through. I was still working because again, the expectation is you work. So somehow I was like
mm,
a functional depressed person, but there was no joy in my life. Absolutely no joy.
mm,
And then my second trimester, I was diagnosed with um uh, what's it called? Diabetes, gestational diabetes, which means I had to get on a really restricted diet. I had to like do blood tests every single day, 3, 4 times a day, and it just made me miserable. I was absolutely miserable. I remember eventually. So interesting enough, unlike my son was born 2 weeks later. My daughter was induced 3 weeks early because even my doctor said, you know what, you're suffering, you're miserable, and you have diabetes. Like, let's just take this baby out. They're at full term now. They'll be fine. Let's just take this baby out. And when I gave birth, I just felt like as if I always describe it as I felt like I'd been wearing like a dirty, wet, heavy smelling coat for the last 9 months. And when I gave birth, I just kind of like left it in the labor room and like I walked out free. So I could tell a very big difference in like my mood, my happiness, my outlook on life. And just knowing, I think also in that moment, I also knew like this is probably my last baby. Like I cannot possibly go through this again. But all
mm,
the ickiness and sadness and darkness that I'd been feeling while I was pregnant, I left pretty much like with my placenta in the labor room to
mm,
be that blunt. And I was a lot happier with my child, even though she was a more difficult child. I was a lot happier. I was a lot more positive. I did a lot more like in terms of just like going out and about and doing walks and everything than with my first child.
mm,
Yeah, and I did not get the baby blues. I was
mm.
just
Oh, you
happy.
didn't get the baby
No,
blues
no,
with.
not with my second child. No, I was just happy. I was just happy. And maybe because I was happy that the pregnancy was done, like nothing
Mm,
could compare to that joy. I don't know, but it was a much joyous experience like the first few months. I probably
mm,
also had, like, I had benchmarks now, right? So I already
mm,
knew I'm not a big milk producer, get formula upfront. Um, yeah, babies wake up 4 or 5 times a night. You can kind of put them on a rough schedule. This is how you're gonna figure it out. When you drink X, it helps the production, but don't overstress it. So I already had like benchmarks internally. This is a good thing,
mm,
is a bad thing. A fever below this, below 101, probably not so major. So I
mm,
could rely on my experience, and maybe that's also helped a bit. But mostly, I'll just say I was just much happier.
mm, mm, mm. Sure.
Yeah,
Those are very different experiences. I mean, it sounds like both
exactly.
were hard in different ways.
Yeah, and they
But
produce
also,
very different children.
yes, yes, yes. You know, in psychology, we often say that no two children are born to the same mother. And I
Yeah,
think that's exactly the point that you're describing here is that you are a different mom to every child you have, and it's
yeah,
based on different circumstances, whether it's
exactly.
pregnancy itself, the birth itself, or even external circumstances.
Yeah.
Your
Even like where you are in life. Because I remember like
Mm,
with my first child, for example, I'd just become an engaged manager at McKinsey. There was lots of pressure around like, okay, now you're an EM, what do you need to do? Like I was still in like a hardcore grind. With my second
mm,
child, I'd already left consulting. I was in a much in my current job was a lot more relaxed. I was also like the most senior person in the organization. So I had leeway to create structures that work for me. I had a lot more control over my schedule, over my timetable. It was the pandemic, so I was working mostly from home. So there's a lot
mm,
of like leeway around like, okay, how can I make this motherhood thing work? Whereas before with my first child, the schedule did not always depend on me. I needed to have certain deliverables, certain things I need to do on other people's clocks, show up at this time, show up on a
mm,
Sunday, show up on that. So even like where you are in your career works. And I think that's why lots of women are spending time, effort, and money to plan when they give birth in their career, because where you are, the stage you are, also will determine the kind of mom you are and how much control you have over how you can show up for your kids or show up for yourself.
Mm, mm. So let's speak a little bit about that, the career mom.
Mhm.
So tell me about the Hilda who pre-babies,
Yeah.
pre-first baby, at first baby, and then post second baby. What sort of career person were you? How would you have described yourself in
I
these different?
think pre-baby, I was just out to get it. I was just out to get it. I was doing my best. I was working hard. I was doing what needed to be done. I was jumping on planes. Whatever happened, I could do it. After my first baby, I went back to that job and I tried to do the same thing and I couldn't. I just couldn't. And the many things. I think I had like a heart to heart with myself and with several people. And I was like, I haven't seen my son awake in a month because I'm
Mm,
leaving home before he's up and I get home after he's asleep. Fine, maybe I might breastfeed him a bit at night, but he's barely awake. And then I was working weekends as well. And I was like,
mm,
when does this end? Like, what happens when he has homework? Who's going to help him? And then I spoke to a bunch of people and like who are, moms as well. One of them was like, oh yeah, I live with my mother and my mother-in-law lives down the street. Like, oh, good for you. I don't live close to my parents. Um, the other one said, no, I get it. It's rough, but I'm working towards a goal here. I know that I can get to this goal in the next 18 months and then I'll have all the time onto my world. So until then, I'm happy to sacrifice it. The other person had left the firm, had children, whatever, and then come back later, post children. I was like, okay, this kind of makes sense to me. But I realized that my situation was just I couldn't compare myself to any of the other thriving moms in the organization. So I quit. I just said, you know what? Despite the fact that I really love my career and I like what's going on here and I've had a good run, let me quit while I'm ahead. I didn't have a
mm,
job offer or anything. I just knew that I think by the time my son was around 7 months, I thought, you know what? Until he's a year old, I just want to focus on taking care of him because remember you're trying to create capacity. And what happened with me in that case is that I just failed to create capacity for both this job and my child. And
mm,
some people might pick the job, which is every woman's right, and just have like your mom move in with you or whatever, whatever, whatever. I picked the child and said, you know what, I'll figure this thing out. I'm highly qualified. I know I'm driven. I'm advanced enough in my career that I'll fall somewhere good, but I need to figure this thing out. And for now, I need to figure out this mom thing. So I
mm,
quit my job, I think December 2018. I didn't have prospects. I was not interviewing. I had not spoken to anyone. I just knew I wanted out. And I was doing like, independent consulting here and there, but mostly at home, spending time with my child, getting to know him, taking photos. That's actually when like my Instagram blog was born because I was talking about when I'm feeding him, when we're going for walks, when taking him swimming, every single thing. I just really paused my life and said, for the next, 5 months or so, I want to be a mom. I want to
mm,
just hack this mom thing. And I actually think doing that might have helped me a lot with my second child because I think there's lots of like learnings and just like getting comfortable with the idea of like taking care of a child that happened during that time that previously I had not made time for because I was working, or maybe it was just too fresh. I just given birth. I was still like in the zone, in the fourth trimester as they call it. But I had this time between 7 and 12 months where I just focused on, okay, let me be there for my kid and also for myself. So
mm,
how there's always, I think I've spoken before about like how motherhood sometimes can be like a three-legged stool. There's the child, there's you, and there's everything else in your life, right? So in this case, my two legs moved from, at first my leg was, I think work was taking up pretty much all the legs, but I was trying to do like work and baby, never time for me. So in quitting, what I essentially did was to say from now on it's just me and baby. And
mm,
let me first get this under control. And once I've got this under control again, and again, this is coming from the baby blues and everything. So it's like, something has to give. So let me get this under control. And once I've got it under control, I'm sure I'll go out there and I'll find a role, which is what happened almost to the dots. Like my son was probably like 13 months old when I got into my new role. And
mm,
by then I was very comfortable. Like I knew exactly what I wanted. And I was also like in a place where I could advocate better for myself. So I was like, I don't want to work on Friday afternoons. I spent that time with my child. We're doing like a class together, blah, blah, blah. And I could put the stuff all up front. Every single thing that I had not had in my previous job, I kind of made a condition for my new job to say, this is what it's going to take for this thing to work for me. I need
mm,
X, I need Y, I need this much time with my child. I'm probably going to work 7 to 3. So I'm early in, but leave early. Later on, I made these things that are policies, right? Like options for older moms to say, if you want to come in early and leave early, it's up to you. Or if you want to come in late and leave late, up to you. Like flexibility for young parents, not
mm,
just moms. dads as well. But I try to do that upfront. So getting to the job was already more confident. And then I'm there for a while. Fortunately, I was growing in my career. And by the time my second baby came along, I guess 2 or 3 things were happening, right? One, I was in a good place. Like as a CEO, I could make decisions, I could build structures, I could change policy in a way. And then also it was a pandemic, so we're working from home. So no matter what happened, even after maternity leave, even though it was shorter, I could still work from home. So I could work with my baby. I could work next with in bed with the baby next to me. There was no pressure to like go out into the world, probably until until my child was like almost a year, I would say. Which in a way helped. I think lots of parents will always be grateful for the pandemic because you were home. You're home. It's easier to just catch things early. It's easier to not feel that sense of loss, because I think a lot of what happens also with like as I said, leaving my son and saying I've not seen him awake for a month because I'm leaving early and coming late. That didn't happen in the pandemic because we're working from home. So you don't have that sense of loss when you leave maternity leave and leave your child with somebody else and you're away with them for 12 hours. That didn't happen to me with my second child. And I think it gave me like a buffer and enough time to get confident again and to kind of skip to the place where I'm happy to get back into work. So all the challenges that I've had were kind of like hidden by the blanket of I'm working from home anyway. Yeah, how bad can it be? Yeah.
And
But
Hilda,
now getting back here, 2 years in, I'm back to like the ambitious person. I think I'm kind of clear that I may not have any more children, and I'm okay with that. And it's more like, okay, fine. Now, how do I get back onto this horse and just push, 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 push? But this is my daughter's 2 years old, and I'm just getting to that point now.
Yes, because earlier on you mentioned that it takes you about 2 years to get back to feeling like yourself again. Did I hear you correctly?
Yeah, me 2 years. I think maybe for other moms it's different. And I know there's all this pressure about snapping back, right? But snapping back mentally, physically, whatever. I'm not that person. I've tried to be that person. I'm not. It takes time. It takes mental time for me to get to a place where I'm comfortable with me having a baby and having a new life, in my life. It takes time for me to get back to mastering work. And honestly, like coming from maternity leave, like when you've not worked for that long, your brain is foggy. Then you're not sleeping, your brain is foggy. So you start like you don't have the unlimited capacity you have when you're at your best. And that's just a fact. I think it probably took me like 7-8 months to become my best at work again. And even then, I'm still like going back and forth, But let's say 7 or 8 months to become like back to being my best at work. So by the time my baby's a year old, and now you think, okay, fine, how do I find myself again? How do I lose this baby weight? I know some of it gets lost naturally, some of it doesn't. Mine, I'm still like 2 years later, I'm still struggling. So like maybe 10 kgs above my pre-pregnancy weight. But I know it's going, but I just didn't have mental capacity to focus on it before. How do I revive my friendships? A lot of people say like young moms disappear because, man, life is hard. You're dealing with a lot of stuff. And then you now have to start picking up the phone and calling people, hey, it's been a while, do you want to grab coffee? Because now you finally have capacity to grab coffee or lunch. Baby's old enough for you to leave them with somebody for a few hours, or you can take them out to the restaurant and you'll have it under control. So then you try to start finding yourself again. And then so when you get back to a place where you've got some balance on those 3 stools, you're okay at work, your baby's okay, and you kind of have an idea of yourself, then you can begin to dream. And that's what I feel happens to me. The 2-year points when I start to dream again. Until then, you're not dreaming. You're surviving. You're trying to make sure you're not fired at work. You're trying to make sure your child does not die. You're trying to make sure you and your partner don't break up because, man, babies can also do a number on that. You're trying to make sure, just trying to make sure that from a basic, and even you, that your mental health is okay, that you're not running mad. And so when you get beyond that point, you get up and like, okay, fine, guess what? I actually survived this phase and now I can dream. What do I want? What happens next? What's the future? For some people at this point, the future is I want another child, which is perfectly fine. I'm ready for another child. And I've got lots of women that I know and friends that I have who are like that. And for others like me, it's more, okay, what's the next phase of my career? What's the sprint? And how long is the sprint going to be? What am I going to do, accomplish between now and I don't know, 3 years on the next baby, whatever. I need to go. What's the plan? And they get into another sprint. So that's kind of how it works for me until around this point. There's just no space to dream.
I find that so profound, Hilda, that it sounds like it took you time to get back to that ambitious Hilda. But I don't even know if it's because it took you time or you made the mental choice and decision to say, I am going to park Hilda, the ambitious Hilda, and this is the decision and choice I'm making now to focus on my baby. I mean, why did you make that choice?
I think just learning from my first time round, right? I went back into work. I was trying to be the ambitious Hilda immediately. I was trying to do everything and everything collapsed. And eventually I quit my job, a job that I previously really loved.
Mm,
Because like this is not working. So maybe with my second child, I add more of that in context, like rather than force everything and try to come back as this big bang, lose the weight, get back into the job, kill the job, be this perfect mom, blah blah blah. Rather than do that, actually just let there be a natural progression. Because even when I rushed things, and eventually I had to quit my job and just kind of okay take a step back and figure things out, it still took me the same amount of time, right? So I realized that forcing it does not do anything. It's not like you make a decision to do it, but at the same time,
mm,
for me, there's no capacity. And if I try to
mm,
do everything, it will fall down. That's just a fact.
mm,
Um, I mean, if you imagine, and for some moms, I know it might be the situation you're in, or you have to do it, or maybe that's what you want to do, and I understand it.
mm,
But imagine like you have a 3-month-old baby and you're doing job applications or job
mm,
interviews or applying for a fellowship, or it's quite stressful. And I think mothers who do that are really strong and I can imagine they go through because it's a lot of work, or like you're doing a PhD or something like that, right? It's a lot. And if you have the capacity, the space to just like say, let me kind of time this out and follow a natural progression of things, not force anything, listen to my body, listen to my baby, listen to my life. For me, I did the second time round and pretty much ended up at the 2-year mark. The first
mm,
time round was a crash and burn, and then start up again. And I think I learned from that not to do the same
mm.
thing.
So you learn from experience. I
Yes.
mean, and I think that this is not something that's maybe spoken about a lot, which is that there is a biological and psychological process that happens from the
Yeah.
time that you fall pregnant or from the time that you discover that you're pregnant,
Exactly.
where your brain actually changes. So there is
Yeah.
brain process that happens that actually accommodates for this person that's going to be dependent on you.
Yeah.
So we call this maternal preoccupation, where
Yeah.
for some time you are just going to be preoccupied with this new creation that you
Yeah.
have to nurture and nurse. And
Yeah.
that is a fact. And I think that
Yeah.
some mothers try to fight that, that, oh no,
Exactly.
I'll give birth and then I'll go back to work, I'll do this, I'll do that, I'll do that.
Yeah.
What I really like about what you shared is that there is a natural progression around pregnancy, giving birth, and getting back to feeling like
Yeah.
yourself.
Yeah.
Hmm.
No, that's true. But I've never heard of the term maternal preoccupation, but it's so relatable.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, some moms often also it can be scary as well for some moms,
Mhm.
the way in
Mhm.
which they think about their babies. So oftentimes, what I hear is in the first weeks there is this preoccupation with, will this baby be alive? Can I sleep?
Yeah,
Will I, if
exactly.
I wake up, will they be
Yeah,
alive?
will they still be
Will I
breathing?
swallow them?
Yeah, and
Will I
it's not like
swallow them with my breast?
there's even like this there's a phenomenon of the phantom cry, right? Like your baby will be sleeping right next to you, and I swear you'll hear her crying in the bathroom. You just like wake up in a panic, like my baby's crying, and even or like where's my baby? And right next to you, quiet, very very calm, but you can hear
Mm,
them crying or you can hear them in distress.
yeah.
It's very real. Yeah,
Mm, mm, mm.
it feels very real.
Yeah. And then Hilda, do you feel like there are certain sort of maybe skills or psychological skills per se
Mm.
that motherhood has actually given you in a way? Are there any skills that you can
I don't
see
want to
through
say
your motherhood journey?
I don't know if there's skills. There are a number of things. One, I think generally I'm much better at asking for help. I think as women, especially African women, we're socialized not to ask for help. We're socialized to be strong, to carry every single thing, and to do every single thing, and to never, ever, ever complain, right? And I was in that zone, especially my first child. Maybe even that's also why I had the baby blues, because I was afraid to ask for help. Because when you ask for help, especially when relating to parenting, you're seen as a failure, or you can think of yourself as a failure because society expects that things should come naturally to you. Everything should work well. You're born to do this. So I think one of the things that I learned quite well, like from pregnancy, is just ask for help, and not just in terms of parenting, but in all areas in my life. I never used to be the person who could say, "Hey, I'm struggling with X, help me." Now I am, because I
Mm,
realized that with a child, especially, you need all the hands you can get. So I got comfortable asking for help and just saying where I feel inadequate and when things aren't working out, and it's translated into benefits in other spaces of my life. The other thing is, I think I'm a lot more empathetic. I always say that, having children made me a crier, but it's not that I'm just crying. I think it's more relatable. I relate more with the pains of the world and the pains of other people. Because I look at somebody, I'm like, this is somebody's child, or they have children. Like, oh my God, what are the children feeling like? What if this was me? Like, it's much easier for me to put myself on other people's shoes than it was before. Before, as one of these people, like, it's your life. You can manage your life. And I had a very stoic approach to things. I still have a very stoic approach to things, but I think
Mm,
having children made me a lot more empathetic than I previously was. Um, I would say, in a way, and this doesn't make sense because it's going to be contradictory. In a way, I'm much better at regulating my emotions, but at the same time, my emotions are so much wilder. Like, like the swings are just like it's like a constant pendulum swing. Um, because you know what they say when you have children, it's like having your soul living out of you, like your heart living out of your chest, right? So things
mm,
like I was in Cape Town last week, for example, for work, and I got an SMS from my son's school saying, "Oh, your son bumped his head today. A medical report has been sent home with him, and if you want to look up more information on concussions, here's a link like to the NHS." And I was like, oh my God. Because if you're away from a child, I didn't read anything else. All I read was bumped head concussion, not that he might not have a concussion or that, he's fine, we'll send it back home. It was bumped head
mm,
concussion, and then you're not there. So automatically, like, your emotions just go like really, really wild. And then other
mm,
times, like, you come home and your child is sick or something is happening. Or maybe they do something really good, or they, like, my daughter starts to walk or starts talking, and out of this world. And even for myself, I feel like my capacity for joy is a lot higher, but so is my capacity for sadness. But at the same time, I'm less reactionary towards these things. Like, I learn how to accommodate them. Like, I've got better skills. Like with the Cape Town thing, for example, I just called the nanny. What happened? Spoke to him on video. Is he talking? Is he okay? And I can be like, oh, that's fine. So I've gotten much better at regulating emotions, but the swings have gotten a lot more intense. Lots more joy, lots more sorrow.
mm. I mean, it makes me think of something that you and I spoke about around how there's this, you now recognize or realize your creative capacity after you've become
Yeah,
a mom. You're like, oh my
that's
gosh,
true.
I can create. And I
That's
wonder whether there's
true.
something about the depth of creation that you're speaking to around your variance in emotional expression
The
and
funny
feeling.
thing is, it might be. When we spoke briefly about this, but I didn't speak about, like, where it comes from, because yeah, like, I do feel like with my first child, I feel like I was born with. When he was born, I feel like my creative self was born. I started my Instagram blog. I was, doing stuff on Canva. I'm doing video graphics. I'm doing like a course on what's it called, Photoshop, and all these things. And I realized I can express myself. I can write. Oh my goodness, I love writing. I'm actually good at it. People enjoy my content, which is something before that maybe had always been buried deep inside. Like, I can remember like a Hilda at 13 who was great at writing, but
Mm,
it had kind of buried it because of life and just the grind and pushing. And then you feel like this infinite capacity. And on the one hand, you're like, yes, I can do this. And then it's like, if I've got this talent, I've got this child I need to role model for. What will
mm,
I tell them 20 years from now about following their passions if I'm not following mine? It's almost like, I've already done this big, tough thing. I brought a life into this world. Um, what else can I create? What else can
mm,
I bring into this world? And do I have an obligation to bring it into the world if it's inside me? Um, so that's something that I really felt. You're right. It could be just to do with this infinite joy, or like, big, the bigger variance. I don't know, but yeah, I definitely did
mm.
feel that. Yeah,
I think that's really powerful. I suppose getting in touch with that power inside of yourself. I think then
yeah,
it opens up other possibilities.
yeah,
But I wanted to also just before we go into questions, we'll go into questions in about 5 minutes. But I wanted to speak about your experience of motherhood and your philosophy around mothering or parenting
yeah,
and parenting groups because that's a thing. you
yeah.
know and
So
your experience around that.
so first of all, like, my general philosophy of motherhood and parenting is that we're shepherds, right? We're shepherds, and the best we can do is guide the sheep. There's not much we can do that will make our kids who they are. I think it's not even just our DNA, because they have the DNA of at least, like, 5 sets of ancestors, right? So at the most, like your child can inherit like only 25% of your traits and get like some traits from other people, right? Like my daughter is an introvert. She's not a morning person. She does not like to talk. She's quite combative. And everybody's like, whose child is this? Because it's not my husband's child. It's not my child. I mean, in terms of like personality and character and temperament, right? My son tracks is both of us. My daughter's like this outsider, right? And it's always like, um, you can't control that. So the best you can do is to be the best possible shepherd. If you think about like the difference between like a shepherd with sheep and maybe the typical parenting we have is that you can guide the sheep, show them where the pasture is good. You They'll eat if they want to eat. Take them out of danger, like because like think about it, typical shepherd thing. Walk with them when the path is narrow. They may be thinking, be ready to hold them and make sure they don't fall off. But you can't carry a sheep and say stay here, or you don't make the sheep. And we don't make children. Children come from where they come from, and the way they come to us, all we can do is guide them through life. So that's my philosophy, and it shows in how I interact with them. I try to give a lot of independence as early as possible, down from like child-led weaning, eat with your hands, eat what you want to eat, whatever. I try to leave exploration open. I'm not like a Nazi of anything, so I'm not like a breastfeeding Nazi, or I'm not sorry for using that word, I don't know if it's appropriate, but it's used a lot online. I'm not like you must be eat 100% healthy meals, no sugar, no, I'm nothing, but I believe in moderation of everything. So the guidance, like, you've had a lot of chocolate today. Are you sure you want some more chocolate? Because your stomach is going to hurt. Or you've been in a tablet for a while, you're going to get nightmares. Although, like, things like you can also control certain things, like, 5 hours of screen time and you're done, whatever. So that's generally my philosophy. And I find that because of that, I've struggled to align with mothering groups, because mothering groups typically align around strongly believing one thing, or like a set of things, certain beliefs about motherhood. And I'm like, where is there room for the child in all this? For your child's personality. So if I, in a group where if you're not breastfeeding, you'll be ostracized because how dare you? How dare you? Don't you know this is the most important thing a mother can do for their child? But I'm like, dude, there's no milk. There's no milk. Or you find those who are like, super religious and want, your child to be baptized and to go to church and go to Sunday school, and are they participating in everything? Or you find others, I mean, whatever they're anchored on, typically it's so insular around the topics which they all believe, that if you're somebody like me who's a shepherd and trying not to believe everything, but to just be open-minded about where the path goes, you'll struggle. And I eventually left like all the motherhood groups I was in, because I was like, okay, this is not working out for me. I don't feel welcome, and it's clear like I've got different objectives and goals, and I'm always like throwing out these controversial spanners. And I like one of the recent ones. Um, I think we're talking about how in the UK now they're including LGBT friendly language into the curriculum. I know it's this group of African mothers who are like all outraged. And I was like, but guys, what's wrong with that? Don't you actually want your child to understand like this part of life? Because it is part of life. And they are going to have friends who are LGBTQ. They are going to be in situations where like, they've got friends who have two moms. It's like, despite what you may feel about it, there's also the actual practical, like, I don't mind. And I really want my child to get this education. But there's also the practical thing of how is your child going to survive in a society if you close him away from the things that are around him. And you just feel like on a WhatsApp group that everybody's just like getting a huge like hammer and banging you on the because you're saying this one thing, like everything else you've been saying is fine, but you've now finally found the point at which you don't align. And
Yeah.
it's conform or be ostracized. So at that point you get ostracized. So I think because I'm like quite open-minded, and I'm trying not to impose things on my children, rather be a shepherd, a guardian for them through life. I find myself ostracized, and I can imagine lots of moms do as well. But for some, some they thrive. There are people who love communities, there are people who are happy to conform to communities, for whom communities is what makes this thing work. And if that's what makes it work for you, by all means, do it. Yeah.
And you speak to something that we strongly believe in as psychologists, which is that your baby is your guide. You can
Yeah.
never go ahead of your baby. Your
Exactly.
baby tells you what they need, and your role as a mother is to metabolize their
Exactly.
experiences and then take it back to them in a
Yeah.
way that you can manage it, as
Yeah.
opposed to you kind of saying, no, you're full, or no,
Exactly.
you're hungry.
Yeah. Yeah.
A child is a psychological agent, and we need to be the guide. But I'm just aware of time, and you spoke a little bit about your transitions in career and all of that. So for the mothers who are, oh, moms to be, pregnant women, and moms who are just given birth, etc. Whether they're working or they're studying, they're doing their PhDs, etc.
Yeah.
What sort of advice would you offer them in terms of managing expectations at work? How can they prepare themselves
Yeah.
and protect themselves in a way when
Yeah.
it comes to work?
I'd say the first thing you need to do is have an honest conversation with yourself. Don't lie to yourself about what is possible, what's not. Where are you? Like, what was your birth experience like? Where are you mentally right now? Can you push, or can you just maintain what's going on? Or do you actually need a break? Once you have that honest conversation with yourself, because if you lie to yourself, the whole thing falls apart. But when you're honest with
Mm,
yourself and say, okay, you know what? This is where I am in my journey right now. This is the kind of
mm,
support I'm going to need. And this is what I'm expecting. Maybe I'm in a promotion window I want to push no matter what. What kind of support do I need? Maybe actually I just want to take a break. I don't want to be like on a fast track for a while. Maybe I want to take a break from my PhD, or I want to, maybe it's going to take a bit of a longer time, but have an honest conversation with yourself about what you need. After
mm,
you do that, speak to your support system, ideally your partner or people in your life who are supporting, and say, guys, I want to do this. I'm going to speak to my company about it. I'm going to speak to everybody else about it. Can you support me in this way? Like, mom, I want to get back on the fast track. I need to be traveling, every Friday to this clients. Is it possible for you to come and help me with my child every Friday? You have those conversations from a place of honesty, because it's generally what you want. Then after that, you can speak to your company and say, guys, I know I'm coming back from maternity leave. Ideally, I recommend you reach out to them like maybe 3 weeks before maternity leave is over, and so I'm coming back from maternity leave. This has been my experience so far. This is how like my birth experience went. My baby's fine. Everything is healthy. I know it might be a bit much, but I want to push. How can you support me to push? This is what I want. I'm looking for such opportunities. I think I can manage XYZ, or I want to take a step back. I'm not having an easy time. I want a bit more time integrating in. This is what I can do to make sure like what's on my plate does not fall down. This is the support I need from you. I think the reason why these conversations always don't really go right is because the mom has not had an honest conversation with themselves. So they go back
mm,
into the work trying to be what work expects them to be, as
mm,
opposed to trying to communicate who they are now and what they need.
mm,
And you find for most people, when you communicate who you are now and what you need, especially if you've been good in the past, they will accommodate you. But if you go in based on a lie, they'll just keep the expectations steady,
mm,
thinking you are the pre-pregnancy, pre-birth person, and you just come back, fresh from vacation, and that's the challenge. So that's what the recommendation to get. Have an honest conversation with yourself about what it's going to take for you to do what you need to do. Have an honest conversation with the support system, because that's you building the support system that's going to make you successful. Then speak to work, and when you speak to your work, also include your support system. I need to leave at 3 p.m. Monday to Thursday, but on Friday I can push really hard because my mom is going to step in. Have these
mm,
conversations. They're also confident that you've put in the work and a thought about what's going to take to make it work. Or I want to work 50% for the next 4 months. I've not had an easy time. However, once I get back, I can commit towards the end of the year when it's a busy period to doing ABCD. When you have these honest conversations and bring everybody on the same page, it'll work out much easier for you. And also, if
mm,
it doesn't, then it forces you to have a conversation of, okay, fine. If these guys are not accommodating and it's not going to work out, at what point do I look for another job? Do I need to just hang in here for a while I sort myself out? Do I have room to quit now and just find something else? But yeah,
mm.
either way, you know.
Okay, great. So it's really having that honest conversation with yourself initially,
Yeah, yeah,
and sort of communicating that to different systems in your life.
exactly,
And
exactly.
Hilda, I mean, as the CEO of an organization, I mean, what sort of structures are you putting in place to build a family-oriented organization?
Let me see. So one, we introduce like flexi hours for young parents. Do what you need to do. We find a lot of moms come in from 7 to 3, so they can go pick up their kids from the creche and have an early afternoon. We find lots of dads actually come in late and leave late, maybe because they're doing the morning school drop-offs. So we just get that flexibility. We can come in 7. You can do 7 to 3, or you can do 8 to 4, or you can do 9 to 5, or you can do 10 to 6, and that really
Mm,
helped. We also have nursing rooms, for example. If you want to pump and keep your milk in the fridge, we can help with that. We have in some of our markets, after maternity leave is formally done, you can still work remotely or work from home for another 3 months. So that kind of lets you ease in, but also just keep like a really open door policy and conversation around, like, every situation is different. If you come into the organization and having a complex pregnancy, we can give you some leave before time. I don't know. It's about like individual situation. That's why it's important to be a good advocate for yourself, because what I've seen is when the conversation comes up, then we make accommodations for what that parent needs.
okay,
Yeah,
great. It's great to hear that you are practicing what you preach.
yeah, I have no
Organization.
choice.
Uh,
Yeah.
And Hilda, as a mother of a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old, now you're saying you are back to that ambitious Hilda who wants to now go for it. How do
Yeah.
you juggle your aspirations as a mom, aspirations in your career, as
Yeah.
well as your passion for motherhood? How do you juggle the two?
So I think that's the thing, right? I think I'm in a place where I now know that whatever my aspirations of career are, they have to leave room for me as a mom, right? I cannot go back into life as somebody who doesn't have children. So it kind of like shapes your ambition as well. What kind of job do I want to go for? Like, what kind of organization do I want to work for? What are my priorities? For example, right now, my biggest my best move would be like a place. I'm not looking to move jobs for a while, but I think about 3 years from now, I'd love to work for this one of these like multilateral organizations that pay your children's school fees, right? Because that's like a huge thing taken off your plate. Um,
Right.
but I'm always thinking about like how does this fit with my life as a mom? It's never too
Mm,
far away from me, and like even like when I kind of changed roles recently, not too much when I was part of the negotiation was like, you know what, guys, I want to relocate to the UK. I want to be working remotely. I will be traveling, every single month to the markets. But right now,
mm,
in this stage of my life, the way my children are, it's important for me to be in a place I feel like is a stable environment for them, and this is what I've chosen. I'm happy to stay on, but if I want to stay on, there's one of my conditions. What do you
mm,
guys think? And I spent maybe 6 months having this conversation before they said yes, before our board said yes. So I
mm,
think it's always conscious in my mind. It's like motherhood is the leg that never goes away, right? Even when
mm.
you're sick, however sick I may be, my son or my daughter will still wake up at 5 a.m. in the morning and come to my bed to say good morning, mommy, and want to cuddle, right? It never goes away, which kind of informs how you think to the future. Um, sometimes like, okay, fine, maybe 10 years from now, my kids will be in boarding school. I can do X. I can move to Cape Town and live in that nice sunny place. But at the same time, like, okay, fine, if you live in Cape Town, you're still coming every 3 weeks, every 3 months, every 6 weeks to see them because of half term and end of term and everything. So all my ambition kind of like is like there's a motherhood filter built in. I'm not looking for anything that would take that away from me.
I see. So
Yeah.
for you, that's the priority.
Yeah.
Okay. And
That's
just let me just see if we have any questions from the guests. But in the meantime, while I take questions, Hilda, were there any sort of resources or tools that have helped you in your motherhood journey that you could maybe share with our guests?
Yes, I would say the most important one that I actually still use now is something called the Wonder Weeks. So the
Mm,
Wonder Weeks kind of lets you know like how your own child is developing because children like they can be in a phase where they're like super moody or like crying more than usual, throwing tantrums, and not sleeping, and you find it's because they're also having their own like mental development happening, right? Like right now, I'll just open it up. Like my daughter is in her 10th leap, and they're speaking about, she's entering the world of systems. A system is an organized unit, parts of it are independent but function together. Before she couldn't understand this, but now she understands. Like in a house, there's different rooms.
oh,
So this is our family, that's not our family. That's the kitchen, it's different from the living. So just beginning to understand that. And basically, like the signs they give you for is like you get startled and say aloud no when I catch you doing something you shouldn't be doing. So and that's exactly what I've been saying, like no, you know. But it starts from the very beginning, from like your baby's 2 weeks now. Your brain is
mm,
going to double in size. This is what's going to mean. So that's been like a really good guide. It's on the app stores. It's like maybe $2. And that's been really useful. The other thing has been definitely every mom will tell you your intuition. I think you almost probably always know what's best for your baby.
mm,
Trust your gut. Your gut is like your best friend in this thing. And then third, just create like a group, not a parenting group, but a group of people you really trust, whose opinion you trust, and who you can have honest conversations with, and rely on them. Like I've got like my sister-in-law and like one of my cousins and my mom sometimes,
mm.
only sometimes because there's a huge age gap
Okay.
in terms of expectations. But I speak to them about almost everything about my children, and I think that's pretty much it. Yeah.
Okay. All
Yeah,
right.
and other books,
Great.
like read books. There's so many books. I wish I could tell you, but I'm big on parenting books.
Well,
Um,
there's one book that I would like to share with the audience. It's called, I don't know if you know about it, Why Love Matters.
oh no, I don't. Let me look for
It's
it.
by Dr. Sue Gerhardt.
Okay.
And I think if as a parent, that's the one book that you should really have in
Yeah.
your book. Yeah. But Hilda, we have reached the end of our time and our conversation. Thank you so
Yeah.
much for your honest reflections and just sharing your journey. I know that motherhood, while a lot of people experience it and go through it, it can also feel quite isolating. And it can be hard for people to share their personal experiences. So I really do appreciate this, and thank you so much for making time.
Thank you too. This was nice.
I hope that our audience enjoyed the conversation and that they will use some of your insights through your experience.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. This is the end of our conversation on Being Human Conversations. I will see you again in May. And again, please feel free to pop in any topics that you'd like to hear me discuss or talk about on this. And then as well, I will be sharing the next sort of information around what will be happening, what the next topic is. So please follow our page, like it, and that's where you can always get more information. So thank you.
Yeah. Somebody's asking about the app. It's called the Wonder Weeks.
Clarity on the app you spoke about.
It's the Wonder Weeks, like wonder, like wonderment, and weeks. Yeah.
Right.
So the weeks when you're wondering what's happening with my child.
I'll actually maybe also post it on my Instagram as well.
Perfect.
Just the name. But it is Wonder Weeks. So thank you, everyone, and have a lovely evening.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.